Tonight's speaker, as you can see, has generated an unprecedented amount of interest. This is the largest audience in the 15-year history of the Aerospace Lecture Series. He will be available to sign your copies of his book following his remarks this evening, and we do have more books for sale. We ask that you please give us a few moments after the program to allow us to get set up before you bring your books and other items you may have for him to autograph. Tonight, Brigadier General Paul W. Tibbets relates the story of how he organized, trained, and commanded the world's first nuclear strike force. What General Tibbets and his men did was nothing less than to significantly shorten the Pacific War and render unnecessary an invasion of the Japanese homeland that would have cost thousands upon thousands of American and Japanese lives. It was my great honor to meet General Tibbets for the first time 15 years ago at the United States Air Force Academy, where I was his grandson's commanding officer. Throughout the Air Force, I can assure you that his leadership and command skills remain legendary. You will not find a truer personification of the phrase, an officer and a gentleman. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of America's great heroes, Brigadier General Paul W. Tibbets.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. I appreciate the welcome. We're very happy to be here with you in San Diego tonight and for the past 2 days. And I hope I can make this evening interesting for you. Now, my intended program is to make a few remarks, then show you a video that runs 14 minutes. And that video has crew members from both of the airplanes telling what they thought, what they think, and so forth and so on. Now, that was done by the Greenwich Workshop in Shelton, Connecticut. And they did so after they found out that too many writers, too many news people would listen to us and say something, but when they printed it, it came out different. Revisionism. And what the gentleman up there in the Connecticut Workshop, or Greenwich Workshop in Shelton, he was a Marine captain, and he knew what the war was all about. His people approached me and the other guys and said, what we'd like to do, we'd like to make video. We'd like to get photographs and get a painter and do all of these types of things and make lithographs, you guys to sign. That's how we'll get our money back. And it really did a good turn for us and the people connected with the atomic bomb project. Now, once that's been shown, and by the way, I'm not going to sit here and watch this thing. I've seen it. I'm going to go out and, go to the restroom or do something like that. And but I'll be back when it's finished. And then I'll start making my remarks. After I finish those, we're going to get down to questions. Maybe this video will make you think of some questions. But I think we can have a good time here tonight. Again, thank you very much, and let's get the video started.
When we went overseas, realized this was June, my letters to home, I'm telling my folks that I'll be there a year. This is what I thought. Now, I do know my friends that were in the Navy and that they thought it was a long war. They thought it was going to last at least another year. I think all of us at that time thought we were in for a long war, and a dirty war, a mean war, and a killing war. Each island we got closer to Japan, the casualties increased.
Now, the war went on and was going on, and you have to understand that during that period, people in the service were just really fed up with this. But under those conditions, if we could do anything to significantly shorten the war or end it, why, I think anybody would have jumped at the possibility. We can talk to young people, explain it to them and things, but until they've been involved in it, they just can understand what a total country effort this was. The war was, and everybody was involved in it. Not just the people in the service, although that involved just about everybody between the ages of 18 and 35, but the people working in the home front, building airplanes, building tanks, building weapons of war. That's all it was.
We're in General Ent's office, and he is instructing me as to my assignment. You are going to organize and train a unit to drop these atomic bombs simultaneously in both Europe and Japan. And he told me about using my my code word of silver plate, and cautioned me. He said, Paul, you got a tremendous amount of responsibility there. You got a tremendous amount of authority. Be careful of how you use it. I was never challenged. Nobody ever asked me, can I drop the bomb? Or, you know, have you made a decision who's going to drop it? If they had, I'd have told them, yes. Decision was made the first day I heard about it, and that's going to be me.
Paul told us we were going to drop a new type of weapon. He said that if anybody wanted to back out, nothing would be said. Nobody backed out.
I was brought into the radio shack. You're supposed to be Colonel Tibbets' radio operator. How many hours have you had in the air? I said, 10 at radio school. I was naive. So I didn't know what I was supposed to expect.
Wendover, Utah appeared to me when I got there as the ideal location. Isolated out on the Nevada state line, on the salt flats of Utah, and there wasn't very much there. There was nothing to attract any particular attention out there, and I thought, this is the place I want to be. It would be easy to keep a secret sitting at Wendover.
Nobody ever mentioned the word nuclear. Nobody ever mentioned the word atomic. We just knew it was going to be a big explosion, a lot of destructive force.
During the bomb runs and tests, we're trying to get the ballistics for the two weapons. For the airspeed, you'd have to put in a different drift. You'd have to put in a different trail, which is how far the bomb, where it comes out from behind the airplane. But it took me, I'd say, 2 to 3 months with the background I had to actually realize and believe that they were actually onto something as big as I'd heard. Because with my background, it's hard for me to visualize that one bomb could do what it said.
My organization, the 509th Composite Group, was ready to go to war by the month of May, 1945. And I sent the word in to move the 509th organization overseas. I wanted them to get shot at. I wanted them to experience possible emergencies and everything before they had an atom bomb in their airplane and were really playing for keeps. I wanted the Japanese to see individual airplanes. I wanted them to think maybe that most of those single airplanes that they were looking at were reconnaissance airplanes, because they weren't interested in reconnaissance airplanes at that time. Hiroshima was definitely a military objective. It was also the place in which they were assembling all of their military equipment to resist an invasion.
We were given information about air-sea rescue units and what we would do in case of trouble with the bomb, trouble with the airplane, trouble from enemy action. Had the final briefing at midnight, followed by then a breakfast and down to the flight line.
You knew it was big. You know, it was going to be a big one, and So you were, I think, you were at a level a little higher than you do on a conventional mission. The biggest part of that after the briefing was coming out to the aircraft and seeing this tremendous amount of people around it, Klieg lights with shining all over the airplane, a big crowd of people out there. You know, you were the center of attention. You were the monkeys in the zoo.
And I was sitting there in the seat ready to start engines. And of course, some of the cameras were still out there. And I stuck my head out to ask them, please remove the cameras and the floodlights and all that so we could start cranking up. And at the same time, somebody yelled at me and said, hey, wave at us.
Everyone, clear the field!
I had a bunch of lives on board this airplane that I had to give careful consideration to. And in that regard, I couldn't help but reflect on Chaplain Downey's prayer.
Clear the field! Right now! Clear it!
We pray thee that the end of the war may come soon, and that once more we may know peace on earth. May the men who fly this night be kept safe in thy care, and may they be returned safely to us. We shall go forward, trusting in thee, knowing that we are in thy care now and forever. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
I watched the airspeed indicator go past 160 that night. And we were still on the ground. Those wheels were turning. But I was confident that this was the only way to do it so that I could control with the tail if I had to. So when I'm going down there and I kept it past that magic 140 that Lewis was used to, he started to grab the yoke and pull back on it. He said, lift it off. And I told him, I said, keep your damn hands off of that yoke. I'm flying this airplane.
Weather was very clear. We could see the coast of Japan from probably 75 to 100 miles away. And then I went up and looked over Tom's shoulder, and we compared notes in the city and made sure we had the right target and picked out the bridge that was the aiming point, and then I went back and sat down. And it was in the bombardier's hands at that point.
Well, after flying as much as I had in Europe and planning missions from the very start, I knew a lot about picking up aiming points. It's something that I could pick up as a bombardier real easy. And that the bridge that I picked out was right in the, almost in the center of the city. Made an ideal aiming point.
And then for 5 minutes, I was watching his head there, and he was looking at me and chewing on his cigar. And he said, ain't a damn thing I can do. Nothing. It's going right down the track. And he'd look up at the bomb sight. It's on course. And it was on course until it left the airplane.
Well, I raised up a little and looked out right out over the nose, and Paul immediately started to turn, but I could still see it, but I wanted to make sure it was clear of the aircraft, because I'd had some trouble with some of that tumble here that I was, when I was the window was dropping them. So I wanted to make sure it was falling clear, and it was going straight in.
And we were still pretty close to it then, the mushroom cloud. It showed the cloud rising to about our level, which was in the neighborhood of 33,000 feet, if I remember right. And it also showed the turbulence engulfing the city and moving out into the foothills. And the only thing that I could see of Hiroshima was one of the docks and the bay.
Colonel Tibbets, will you tell us some of your reactions over the target?
Well, as the bomb left the airplane, we took over manual control, made an extremely steep turn to try and put as much distance between ourselves and the explosion as possible.
back, we knew that war was over. There was no way that war could keep going on when what we saw had happened. But they would not admit to the fact. They didn't admit to Hiroshima. They finally admitted to Nagasaki, but even after they gave up, ceded, they didn't show any overt acts to stop the war. So it was necessary to have two bombs, and I think that we back on the ground that didn't fly the second mission were pretty doggone proud of that group of people too.
I think you have to say that you wish the war could have ended without flying missions of this type. But in the long run, I am thoroughly convinced that the use of this weapon did shorten the war and save lives overall, both Allied lives and Japanese lives. Because if you play what if, and you say what would have happened if the bomb had not have been dropped, and you start looking at, fire bombs would have continued, even without an invasion, the casualties would have been very, very heavy.
War is bad, horrible. And even in Europe, my intention over there is the same thing as Hiroshima, was to help get the war over, to end the killing.
It's a devastating thing. It came as a tremendous surprise. It shocked people. If people can see the attitude that we have, the patriotism we had at the time, the sincerity of our beliefs today, I wanted to do everything that I could to subdue Japan. That was the attitude of the United States in those years. That 509th Composite Group was a great group of patriotic men. They all put their backs to the wheel, and we succeeded in bringing that carnage to an end, and everybody got to go home. Serious part of this business, and hopefully most helpful to you people. I'm going to give you a short business about my limited experience and all that sort of stuff. I got my wings in 1938 after 1 year's time at Randolph Field in Texas. I was assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia as a second lieutenant. Fort Benning had 4 airplanes there, which were used primarily to acquaint the infantry with what an airplane could do for them. For those of you that have minds of some of those first airplanes were 046s. They were single-engine job, high gull wing, cruise about 190 miles an hour, fly as slow as 50 miles an hour. We used them to adjust artillery fire. They were used to drop and pick up messages, and that's about it as far as the infantry school. Didn't have too much to do, which allowed the people, the officers that were assigned there. When I arrived there with a classmate of mine, we made a total of 6 pilots. We had a major for the commander, first lieutenant operations officer, and everybody else was second lieutenant. As the younger, there were 3 of us on the, let me say, the younger side. The other people were probably 10 years older than we were. And we got to fly airplanes all the time, anytime we wanted. But one of the requirements was that before you could take your first cross-country home, I got competition. Before we could take the first cross country, we had to go up to the board where there was a map, Department of Commerce map. It showed all of the landing fields known at that particular time. The operations officer, who was a first lieutenant then, Will Tunner, maybe some of you heard of him. Will Tunner started the Berlin airlift, among other things. He ran the Air Transport Command for quite a while. But with that situation, he said, each one of you take a different color pencil. Now, there was only two of us at that moment, because one guy had already been through it. Take a red pencil or a blue pencil, and when you have landed in every one of those fields, now that included paving, it included hard grass, it also included a lot of weeds. And my friend and I, as we used to go fly together because we both had to do the same thing. And we would go in and take a look at the field and decide, well, is this, can we land in this one? We did finish our job. We got to take our first cross-country home. And of course, that's always a thrill, I'm sure. I never was one to really stick my neck out too far. I had heard, and we got advised when we graduated, the commandant, the director of the Flying Training Center was a full colonel, and he came and gave us a graduating address. I don't remember all the things he said, but one of the things he said, look at the guy on your right, look at the guy on the left, turn around, look behind you. Because he said, after your first year of flying, there's going to be 6 of you not going to be here. Well, he didn't miss it too far because 3 of them got killed by getting caught in bad weather. Now, they were not on their own at that time. Some leader of a formation took them into bad weather and they crashed. But by the time the year had passed, the prophecy was true. My my thinking about flying was I didn't want to do all that stuff. I didn't care about acrobatics. I didn't want to fly on the back. I wanted to fly big airplanes. And I flew them like an old maid wherever I went. Only one time did I step aside from that I had promised myself I wouldn't do. When I went to see my grandmother in Quincy, Illinois one time, she died on the Mississippi River. There was a great big bridge there. Sometimes the river was 5 miles wide there when it flooded, but there's a big bridge. And I thought, damn, I'm going to fly under that thing. I didn't do that till I had flown parallel to it, looked underneath to see if there were any wires hanging down there, something to cause a guy to run into, because that did happen to some people. But okay, let me get on quicker. From Fort Benning, after 3 years, I became a first lieutenant. I went to Savannah, Georgia to fly A-20s. And if anybody ever had a good time, I did at that particular time. They were under orders to fly low. You didn't go up high, you went down low. And when I checked out with these guys, they were all much more experienced pilots than I was, and I had to check out to their satisfaction by flying in formation with a leader. It'd be one leader, one on each wing. And he would take us out across the across the marsh flats, right in the area of Brunswick, Georgia, flying up and down there. If you came back and landed and you didn't have chlorophyll on the tips of your propellers, you failed to ride. Now, when they didn't have a leader, I loved to go out. My folks were in Florida, and I loved to go out and get on the water down there and fly just about as low as anybody could fly on the water without stirring it up. And I did that one day, just having a hell of a good time watching what was going on, watching people swim and them looking at me sitting up there. And I happened to go by Palm Beach. I had to go by Palm Beach to get to Miami. And I didn't much more land. I just landed in Miami. Now, that wasn't Miami as you know it today. That was only a sand spur patch. My brother-in-law was there as an employee of National Airlines. He operated radio, he carried baggage, he handled the telephone to give notices on takeoffs and landings and all that. He met me. He said, you came by Palm Beach, didn't you? I said, sure did. Why? He said, well, they called me up down there. He said some crazy guy had come along and flown through the telephone and the power lines at the beach, at the pier out there, and it was all dead. But then he said, don't worry, I know the guy, but he said, don't worry, I know it was your brother-in-law, so we'll fix it. Well, that got me a little bit on the cautious side. When I had served the tour in December of '41, I was flying A-20s, and with those things, we were supposed to be hot pilots. We were used every time they talked about taking the flying pay away from us. Why, they'd send a congressman down to Savannah and let us give them a ride. Now, of course, those low tactics, when you down low, for instance, if you made the turn to the right, the man on the right was then number 3, and the leader would go down, you'd come up, and you'd all three go around belly to nose, and that was about that. Give it 2 or 3 rides. Of course, they do cross over, they change positions, and we did it real close with propellers going by people's heads, and that sort of thing. It had been rehearsed many times. Don't worry about that. But every time they did, they got out of the airplane. They said, "Well, we think you men deserve all the flying pay you're getting." With the bombing of Pearl Harbor, I had already gotten orders the Friday before that to report to Tampa, Florida, to fly B-17s. I didn't have to because the Air Corps had the airplanes at Tampa moved to Savannah because they were afraid the Japanese submarines would come up in the harbor and shell the airplanes sitting on the base. Somebody had forgot to take a look because that harbor, and its deepest place was only 25 feet. But it made for confusion. And I'm telling you, because it was so baffling, and yet looking back, it was serious in those days, but looking back, we did a lot of things that were unexpected, that we had encountered things no one had ever dreamed of, just like this running into buildings, that sort of thing. We got all trained up. I became a squadron commander, 97th Bomb Group. 97th Bomb Group was under orders right away, rather quickly, to go. We did not have belly turrets. We didn't have 50 caliber guns. We had to go to the depots, get the airplanes modified, put a ball turret in the belly, put 50 caliber guns all the way around. Now that took a little bit of time, about 3 weeks. They had started us for the Pacific. We got to Fresno, California, where we held for a couple of days. You did all of this by getting Western Union telegrams. That is the commander getting them. When you landed at the airport, if they had a message, they would, there would be a Western Union telegram, and the guy running the airport would give it to you. But we got started that direction. However, the Battle of Midway took place while we were sitting at Fresno. And when that took place, there was a political change made right quick because they were going to fight 2 wars. But somehow Roosevelt and Churchill got together and they decided to hold the Pacific because the Japanese fleet was not a big threat after Midway. Take that. When the war out, when holding that, everything would be concentrated in Europe. So, okay, we turn around, go back, and we go the long way around through Iceland, Greenland, and Scotland, and we landed in, we got into this didn't all happen at the same time because we were running in trail because of the weather situation. We couldn't fly formation of that. We didn't know enough about those days. But the 97th Bomb Group was sitting on Polebrook, England, by the end of June of '42. Now, when we got there, we didn't have any special orders. We didn't have anything to do other than complete unit training the best we could, fire guns, which anybody in those airplanes those days hadn't had a chance to fire them yet. We had to learn the British system and whatnot because British were wanting the Americans to fly in the daytime, but fillers for our bombing programs. as they lost in the bombing programs, they wanted to have our airplanes be the fillers because they didn't think, they had tried B-17s and said that you couldn't live with them. I'm not going to burden you with that, but we decided a long time ago, even before that, you could live with them if you did it right. Well, the problem was solved, and the Americans were going to go under their own commander. We got started. I led the first raid on occupied Europe with 12 airplanes, counting my own. They sent 6 down as a decoy, trying to attract the British attention. We were going up into the Netherlands. I had a It's a busy time of night, isn't it? I had a reasonable amount of experience, and let me put it this way. We were the first ones to get shot at, first organization to get shot at. As other groups came over, their group's commanders, their squadron commanders, I don't know what else, but those group commanders, the squadron commanders, had to ride with us on a mission and get the idea of what fighting was like. On this particular occasion, I don't know, my 4th or 5th time over, I had a full colonel in the airplane. He was going to be a bomber commander. The man was an old-timer. I don't know how old the man was. I don't really know how old he was, but he talked through his nose, and everybody's scared to death of him. Well, he got in the airplane with me, and what he did was he got right up there in front, looking over my shoulder and everything that went along, and all of a sudden a 20-millimeter cannon shell comes through the co-pilot's window, knocks out the instrument panel, creates confusion there. My co-pilot had his hand badly mangled. He's bleeding. The old boy's trying to grab the throttles and the turbos on the engines. I couldn't. I didn't have time to stop and be polite and say, "Colonel, you're not supposed to do that." I hit him in the chin with my elbow and knocked him on his ass in the back of the airplane. Okay. He understood it. He said, he told me later on the ground, he said, "You did the right thing." And I said, "Yes, sir, I know that." I didn't have time to do anything else. Okay, I survived that. I have still in England flying a little bit. When I led the first 100 airplanes after that, and the first 100 included B-24s. And at the briefing, I told my guys, I said, "Look, we're going to have an easy day today because those B-24s don't have any belly turrets. And those Germans are smart enough, they're going to come right up underneath those." And they did. I saw 11 B-24s spinning at one time in the air over Liège. My next thing was I got mixed up with ferrying high-ranking officers around. I ferried Mark Clark and a man from the Defense State Department to Gibraltar. They were going to make a North African invasion. The man from the State Department was fluent in French. French was his business in the State Department. And Mark Clark was going to be the boss of that fighting down in North Africa. We took 3 airplanes to do that. Because when we got started, we had baggage and things to carry, but the thing of it was that they were going down to talk to Admiral Darlan. He was the chief, he was the highest ranking officer down there, French officer, and he was in command. They were going down to try to get him to not resist the invasion too badly. And they had a pretty good persuader with them, and that was about 80 pounds of gold 20-franc pieces. And he agreed. He took the francs and said, we'll make it easy on you. I went back to England, took those men back. When it came time getting close to invasion, as a matter of fact, they were planning on 2 weeks in advance. I was ordered to go down to Herne, England, where I had taken off with Mark Clark. I was ordered to go down to Hearn, that's the southernmost part of England, and stand by, take 6 airplanes. So went down there, and it's General Eisenhower. When he comes down and looks at the weather, the things don't look right. He doesn't want to stay there because that would create a tension in Hearn. So he said, we're going to go back to, he told the people that we talked to, we were going to go back to London. We'll come back when the weather is better. Excuse me. I've got a dry mouth. I don't have any salivary glands. I'm hard of hearing. What else can I think of? I have to lubricate them with water. And that's the best. I can't do anything else, you know, kind of tightens them up. But I got word to go back to Hearn. They had told the General Eisenhower and somebody on his staff anyway, that it looked like it was going to be okay in a couple of days. So we went down to be there a day ahead of them. They came in. We were under orders to load everything we had. And we had been under orders when we left Polbrook that we could not carry anything with us but our shaving kits. They needed all the room they could get in those airplanes. I was taking in at my airplane. I was taking General Eisenhower and his colored striker that kept these uniforms and did keep shoes shined and cleaned and all that sort of thing. And that poor guy was in the back in the bomb bay, and his nose was, honest to God, wasn't that far from the skin of the airplane with stuff piled up there that's high. It was the only place for him to ride, and that's where he rode to Gibraltar. The other people rode the back there where else. The weather was lousy. We waited and waited and waited as long as they thought we should wait for another weather report hoping to be favorable. Pea soup fog had come in, and it was really sucked in. The last report came at about 11 o'clock at night. Man comes up in a Jeep with his split lights on there. He's the weather guy, and he looks at General Eisenhower and said, I can't promise you any better weather for the next 2 or 3 days. Jimmy Doolittle was going to be in one of the airplanes behind me. He was standing right beside me, and General, matter of fact, it was General Eisenhower. I was next, and we're under the wing of the airplane to keep from getting soaking wet. Eisenhower looked at Jimmy Doolittle and he said, Jimmy, what should we do? Typical of Jimmy Doolittle says, don't ask me, ask Paul. He's flying the airplane. Well, I looked at General Eisenhower right straight. I said, General, I realize your importance to this war effort and everything else, but if I'd have been alone, I'd have been gone. I wouldn't sit here. He said, I got a war waiting on me. Let's go. I hope you got a lot of patience. Okay, we got aboard, took off. Now, I say took off. We got the engines all started, and Eisenhower then was standing between me and my co-pilot, and he said, any way I could ride up here between you. And I got to call my crew chief was right there. And I said, you got anything that the general can sit on so we can take him here? He said, well, I'll look. He came back in about 15 seconds with he knew damn well he had a piece of 2x4 in the back. And he put that 2x4 in there. After Eisenhower hunched himself up, they sat down on it. And in my book, I got a chapter titled, Ike Goes to War on a 2x4. Now, he was a very interested man. He was very interested in everything we did. I thought that was kind of natural, but it was just the last year, a year ago, when Stephen Ambrose, who wrote a biography on him, told me that Eisenhower was a pilot. He had gotten his pilot license in the Philippines, and he understood air power, and he was one of about 40,000 hard-headed infantry guys that didn't think an airplane was worth the damn and should go more than 10 miles offshore. Well, anyway, when he fought the Battle of the Bulge and cleaned on out there, he used air power right because he had a very good air officer. I don't know who it was, but there was a nice article written few years back on his theory, along with his air officer, on how to handle that situation the best. And as I read it, I didn't know that he was a pilot. But anyway, I did that. I think I made a friend because by the time he was running for office as president, I was out in the bikini bomb tests, and he had his airplane driver stopped at not bikini, but wait, you guys know what that. Well, memory slips me, but anyway, it was a regular prepared landing base on a small place, Kwajalein. That's what he stopped at Kwaj, and I wasn't there. I was out on a training flight, but he told the guys to be sure to tell him that I had stopped and wished me the best and all that. So I thought that was just great. We get past that business of getting that part of the war over with. I am talking down North Africa now. I'm down there with 6 airplanes that had taken he and his crew down. We didn't have any fuel. We didn't have any ammunition. We didn't have any bombs. I was able to get what we needed there by going to Mark Clark's headquarters, and he had an air marshal by the name of Welch. It was his air officer. Air Marshal Welch was a very kindly gentleman, strictly British, and I went in and saluted like you would normally, and he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Sir, I got 6 B-17s sitting out here on Maison Blanche, and I think we ought to do something to help this war effort." He said, "Oh yes, you're quite correct." He said, "Go ahead." I said, "Sir, I can't go anywhere because I don't have a bomb, I don't have ammunition, and I don't have any gasoline." Oh, his aide said, "Air Marshal, those things are on a boat down in the docks at Algiers." So he said, "Okay, get them a lorry." Well, we got the lorry. It took us 3 days to load 6 airplanes because 5-gallon tins are, they get an awful lot of them when you do that. And we had to lift the bombs up into the bomb bays. It was, you'd call it terrible, but back in those days, you didn't think anything about it. Everything was tough. We got ready to go, and I wanted to go back and tell him. I'm used to working under some kind of a schedule thing. It's like I was in England, giving you time for takeoffs, time to drop bombs, and routes in and routes out. And I went back and I said to him, when I got in there to his office, I said, "Air Marshal, we're ready to go now." He said, "Well, jolly well, go ahead." I said, "Sir, I don't have any maps. They didn't give me a map on Algiers. They just gave me one to Gibraltar." And he said, "Oh," and the aide was there. He said, "Have you got a map?" The band was gone maybe 3 minutes, and we're looking at each other and passing a word or two. Here comes the aide, spreads this thing out in front of the admiral. We just figured, there's Bizerta. That was going to be my target because that's where Rommel's supplies were coming through Bizerta. The Air Marshal said, "Yes, it is." And I'm looking over his shoulder, and I'm looking at the Standard Oil road map. But that didn't bother me. I got the guys, when I got back out to Mesa Blanche, I told the guys, I said, "Okay, in the morning," I had my navigator tell me how long it was going to take to get there, and I figured I wanted to get out and run up there. I don't remember how many miles it was, a couple hours of flying. And I wanted to run up there at kind of midday. We wanted to fly low. I told them we're going to stay down behind those hills. We're going to keep these airplanes on the ground until just time enough to come up over the knoll. And we were there because had a German fighter field there. I knew all of this from what I'd learned at the headquarters. And they had a German fighter group stationed there. But that was a perfect inline run to go right down the dock. So I told the fellow leading this second element behind me, I said, "I'm going to go for the docks. You drop your bombs, just salvo them as you go by, or trigger them off any way you want as you go by, and we'll continue on out there complete the formation, and as I'll turn to the left and get ready to come. Well, okay, we did that. Well, we were successful. We got a couple of boats on fire, several fires up on the hill where the fighters were. Nobody ever sent photo recon out to do it or get an analysis of what we did. It took me to 1949, about 48 or 49, when they I was in NATO in France, and they let the first 2 German officers that were cleared to come into NATO. I was in the plans office, and one of these guys, there were 2 of them, and they were being introduced by an Air Commodore who was my boss, and this Air Commodore he called everybody's name, and they started to call mine. One of the Germans says, I know Colonel Tibbets. I was Lieutenant Colonel still, and I shook hands with him. He gave me his name. He said, do you know what you did the day you came over the hill and hit the docks, hit that fighter squadron? I said, no, I don't. Nobody ever told me. He said, I'll tell you. He said, you got a direct hit on the officers' mess at noon and wiped the whole squadron out. You know, luck of the dogs. They're bad luck of my good. But, okay, with that, let me move real quick. I'm at General Doolittle's headquarters right after that. And I spent about 2 months with him. When he called me in one day, and he said, I just got a call from General Arnold. He wants you to come back. He said he wants my most experienced field grade officer to come back. I had to go to Wichita, Kansas, and help out on the B-29 airplane. So Doolittle got me out of there rather quickly, and I went back. But on my way back, Eddie Allen, who had been the B-29's test pilot, he was not only that, he was an aeronautical engineer, and he's the project officer for that airplane, for the B-29s. He was testing one, and engine caught on fire. They tried to make it back into Boeing Field and missed it because it crashed into a meat packing plant that was just about a quarter of a mile off of the runway. Now, the meat packing plant had been vacated for top 2 floors, and that left just I don't know how many floors were below it. But anyway, nobody was killed except the guys in the airplane. And Boeing was beside themselves. They had so much trouble with the airplane at that time because the airplane had been ordered into mass production before anything had been tested. That's something to remember. So the first ones to come out, well, okay. Boeing had said they're not going to build the airplane because it's no damn good. And I understood that General Arnold said, you're going to build the airplane and you're going to give us back $33 million we gave you. They said, we have got $33 million. He said, I know that. And you're going to build the airplanes. He said, well, we run the factory. We won't take any responsibility for the airplanes. Arnold said, you don't have to. We, the Army Air Corps, will take responsibility. When after this was completed and word got out, it got back to me because they knew right where I was. Said to be at Wichita such a day. And General Wolf would be there. General Wolf was a man at Wright Field, BG, who was an expert in aircraft manufacturing. And he had he knew at Wright Field, he knew all of the technical experts. And he brought them to Wichita and had a meeting, because I was told to be at the hangar at such and such a time. I was. This was probably in the month of, had to be about July, I think. And I was there. He gave me assignments because he knew everybody by their first name. And I'm the last guy standing. He looks at me and he said, what are you supposed to do? I said, sir, I'm supposed to fly airplanes. He looked out the window. He said, there's 6 of them out there. Go fly them. Well, I just said, yes, sir. I didn't have a co-pilot, didn't have anybody. I'd never been up and touched a B-29. But I talked to a couple of the guys that were in their flight test department there, and I said, hey, you got anybody around here that knows anything about the airplane? He said, well, one of our men, so-and-so, has ridden twice with Eddie Allen as an assistant flight engineer. I said, do you think he know how to start the engines? I said, oh, sure, he will. Well, anyway, he got the man, and the man said, sure, I can start them. Well, we found 2 more guys to ride in the back, and I happened to find a major walking down there, and I said, what do you do? He said, I'm just looking around. I said, well, come on, you and I are going to get in that airplane and fly. He said, I never been in one. I said, I haven't either. That don't make a damn bit of difference. Well, we got in, and what I had a plan, and I mean, I'm willing to take a calculated risk, but I thought about it. I said, well, hell, I want to get a run on this thing and get a little bit of a feel how it feels when it starts to approach flying speed. I'll stop it. I'll turn around and go back. I'll get it down, and next time I'll lift it a little bit and play with the ailerons, and stop, go around, let the engines cool, and back. We got off on the 3rd try, and it was beautiful takeoff. The damn thing acted all right, but it was running hot. The engines were running terribly hot. Now, what happened to you guys real quickly, the engines had been 2 Wright Whirlwind 9-cylinder engines. They were perfect engines in their day. Never had a bit of trouble with them. They married 2 of those engines on a single crankshaft to get them 18 cylinders and 2,000 horsepower. They put a turbo on each bank to give them 2,200 horsepower. And what Boeing had estimated the size of the engines when they designed the cowling and built the cowlings, well, they missed it by about 2 inches. So it wasn't quite big enough, and that's why they got awfully hot. They got awfully hot. Also, they didn't get the carburetors, couldn't handle the fuel just right. They had hot mixtures running. They had low oil pressure in the back. It was not unusual for the back cylinders, the 3 top back cylinders on the back second bank, to get so hot that it caused the valve stems to snap. When the valve stems snapped, it dropped the stems down into the piston there, and bang, 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 metal to metal. You had all the fire, lubrication. You made a beautiful fire, and that's what they just burned like hell. But yeah, that was what happened. The magnetos hadn't been made to satisfy 18 cylinders. We had a lot of trouble. I worked with those things for 15 months. And the more I worked with it, the more I appreciated how good an airplane it really was and how we could use it. Rather quickly, they had they had all the American type fighters, even P-40, which didn't do very much, but they had P-38s, P-51s, and 47s. There were British Spitfires, there were 2 Japanese Zeros, there was a German Messerschmitt. I think those were the foreign airplanes that totaled them. But anyway, they had 1 test B-29. It had turrets in it, it had gun cameras and all that. That airplane conked out during the night, and the next morning when we went to the hangar, Dr. Workman, he was the man who was head of it, physics department at the University of New Mexico. Dr. Workman was wringing his hands. He said, our airplane won't fly. He said, can you do anything about it? I said, what did they tell you? He said, well, they got to change 2 engines. I said, I can't make it fly any quicker than they would. And he said, oh, God. He said, I'm at the end of my contract lengths and whatnot. And he said, I needed this day's operations so I could write the final reports and send it into Washington and get my money. I said, Dr. Workman, I got an airplane out here. It's called a B-29. It doesn't have any turrets in it, any kind, never had. They were using it for other purposes, and I was using it to get around in. And I said, it's a good flying machine. He said, I don't care. I said, I don't have any turrets to pull guns on. He said, I don't care about that. I don't need them. Could you fly that airplane to 25,000 feet? I said, sure. Okay, well, make a long story short, we took off. We got up there. They had the track that they flew was east and west, basically, at 25,000 feet at normal cruise speed, which is about 40 indicated on the B-29 at that time. And I was flying after, I don't know, a couple hours. I was watching these fighter pilots show off. They were just out there doing all kinds of fancy things. But then things got kind of slow. And one radio comes on, tell him to slow down, I can't catch him. Another guy says, my engine's overheated, I can't climb, I can't do this. I looked at my altimeter, because that was the fighter pilots talking. I looked at my altimeter, and I was sitting at 31,000 feet. I drained off the fuel. That went right back here to Cranny. All right, quickly. When that thing had finished and we landed, there was a man from headquarters said to me, General Ent just called General Ent's office called. He wants you at Colorado Springs tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I said, fine. Well, why have to go to Colorado Springs? It didn't make any difference. Strange things happened during the war. A lot of strange things happened that there was no explanation for. And I went next morning. I flew to Colorado Springs. I went to his office and identified myself to the secretary, and she said, oh, yes, Colonel Tibbets, he's waiting for you. She punched the squawk box and said, Colonel Tibbets is here. The voice got back, says, tell him to wait a minute. Fine. I didn't have to wait a minute. The door to his office opened, and out walks the lieutenant colonel. He came up to me, stuck his hand out. He says, I'm Jack Lansdale. I'd like to talk to you. He was wearing the insignia of the Corps of Engineers. Well, real quick, what the hell's the Corps of Engineer guys coming out of Ent's office want to talk to me about? But I went along with it. We walked over to the cloakroom over there. He closed the door, took out a big bunch of papers, and he said, I want to ask you some questions. And I said, why? He said, I got some questions here I need to get answered. I said, okay. And he said, one of the questions, have you ever been arrested? I said, yeah. He said, what for? I said, well, speeding down in Miami. I said, well, my dad was good to me. I had an automobile. I'd take the girls out and over to Miami Beach or something, come back at midnight or so and go down there. Back in those days, Miami only had 40,000 people, so it was, nothing to do but speed at night. And I said, sure, told him that. He said, no, I don't mean anything more serious than that. And right then, I knew that bastard had something. Because one night, and I don't remember what, but one night, when I was a college student there and was home on vacation, I was up in, about 14 miles north, Surfside, about 14 to 15 miles north of Miami Beach. And we were in the back seat of an automobile in a compromising position with a young lady, and a flashlight comes through and says, what are you doing? And Lansdale, he said, he really broke his silence for a second. He said, that's what I wanted to know. He was trying to find out if I'd tell him a lie. And he said, come on, let's go to General Ent's office. So we walked in, and they told General Ent, he said, I'm perfectly happy with Colonel Tibbets. What he meant was, he was the chief of the security for Manhattan District. And they had run everything on me down as far as 9 years of age. And so my honesty was the thing to be checked out. And with that, I met Captain Parsons, a Navy guy who rode on the airplane with me, as naval gun expert, and Dr. Norman Ramsey, a physicist from Columbia, and a PhD from Columbia. He started explaining to me all the things, what was the Manhattan District, their work with the atomic weapon, and so forth. He spent about 45 minutes explaining everything to me because I was going to have to work with them. And Dr. Ramsey was the one guy that they had down at Los Alamos who could listen to the scientists talk, and then he could translate that in language I could understand. And it worked out fine. I got down there on several different occasions, being invited to go down. to check certain things that they would like to have information on the airplane and so forth. Well, with that situation, General Ed said they were left. Sat me down, and he said, he called me by my first name. He said, Paul, he said, you've been selected by me to head this Manhattan District project for the atomic bomb unit. He said, I don't know what to tell you. Nobody knows what to tell you. But here's what I can tell you. Number one, secrecy is the most important thing you can come up with. Number two, you can have any damn thing you want with the word silver plate put on a requisition. But however, don't use silver plate on every requisition. Do normal channels and you won't attract much attention. I said, yes, sir. And he said, now, with that, he said, look, you're going to have an awful lot of responsibility, because you're going to have to make this unit capable of being self-supporting. It will have to be able to do a split operation simultaneously in Europe and Japan. Okay. Now, with that, I thought, he said, I'm giving you a best B-29 squadron in training today. They belong to 504th Bomb Group at Hastings, Nebraska. Go take a look at them. If you don't like them, we'll find somebody you do like. You can have your choice of Wendover, Utah for a base, in North Dakota, Bismarck, Ellsworth Field in Dakotas, and Great Bend in Kansas. Well, I was calling my home duty station at the time I was doing this later testing. I was calling that Grand Island, Nebraska. I was at Grand Island, but I had hardly emptied my suitcase with a few clothes that I had taken in there. But okay. I left the next morning. I went to Wendover, because I thought if I go to Wendover, I'd go on down to Hastings, or if I could I could get up to Dakotas. But when I came over the hills and looked at Wendover sitting there, I thought, boy, that's my field. That is it. There was nothing but salt flats all around. And if you want to maintain security, it should be an easy place to do it, which it was. So I landed. I was waited for by a lieutenant colonel who had been the commander of a P-47 squadron or group that had finished their CCS training down there, and they had left the place, but he waited till I got there to show me around. And I looked. I had an air base ready operating. It was ready for me. That took a big load off of my back. He said, you'll like this place. They had green grass, they had water all over the place, and the buildings were painted brightly and all that sort of thing. It was a good place. I'll tell you, I didn't think of it, but I was told later that Bob Hope had been there, and he said, what's the name of this place? They said, Wendover. He said, I don't know how the hell you don't call it Leftover. But the thing that made it so nice was it caused a cohesion among everybody. We had to entertain ourselves. We had to accept other people, and it worked. As I say, you couldn't have asked for anything nicer. We had a real good group, and I have to this day. I've talked to some of the guys who said Wendover is the best assignment I ever had. I said, well, that's great. Me too. But let me get on. I went back to my. I had a wife and 2 children in Columbus, Georgia, and General Ed said, I want you to get them and take them to Wendover. It'd be better. Now, Wendover doesn't have very much family quarters, but whatever you can make use of, it's yours. Well, we had a little bit. A couple of the other guys brought their wives out. Because they arranged, they took a barracks that was in good shape, but they converted it and made it into a he and she arrangement. and it worked all right for them. But most of there was a lot of guys were bachelors too. It didn't cause any problem that I know of. Now, when I first talked to those men, I told them, I said, wait a minute, 393rd, when I first got them to come back in from Nebraska, I had them come up, and I had a back end of a truck I got up on, and I talked to them. This was the 393rd Squadron, pilots and everybody else, mechanics, everything. I told them, I said, gentlemen, I don't have an airplane for you to fly today, but I want to welcome you to Wendover. And I went on to talk with them. I said, the most guarded thing you have to do here is to watch what you're talking about and who you're talking to. I said, my theory on that is, don't ask anybody what they're doing. Don't let them ask you what you're doing. Don't tell them. You don't need to know what each other's doing. Just do what you're told to do, and everything will be fine. Well, by golly, it worked up to a certain degree. Now, when I got through, I'd already arranged with my security officer that I was going to let them have a 10-day furlough because I wasn't going to have any airplanes for them to fly. They couldn't bring the airplanes from Hastings, that belonged to them, and they didn't have any others. I hadn't ordered any yet. But they were going to loan me 3. So we worked on that basis. Now, from Wendover, if you wanted to go anywhere, by automobile you could go, but most of the time you either had to go to Salt Lake to do it or you had to go to Elko, Nevada to do it. A train or a bus or an airline, you had to go to Salt Lake City or Elko. I told the security man, I said, anybody that takes a furlough will be wearing uniform, and there won't be anybody in Salt Lake or Elko wearing the uniform unless they're from this base. He said, you got a point. He said, okay, let them go. He said, I've got 12 agents in the outfit, and they're here now in Wendover. I said, he said, you want to know who they are? No, I don't want to know who they are. Tell them to do their job and report to you. That's what they're here for. And I don't give a damn who they are. I just want them to do the best job they can. Okay, fine. It worked. We had a couple of guys that got blabbermouths, and matter of fact, we had 4 of them. They got loose mouths. They didn't know what the hell they were talking about, but they talked because, they were taken into a bar and bought drinks were bought and all that kind of stuff. And they said they were Wendover, Utah with a special outfit and so forth. And what were you doing? Well, I can't tell you that. So as soon as we got that information, I had telegrams sent to their houses, returned immediately. And as they came back one at a time, I said, oh, you talked. I said, we're at war. And what you did, you might cause trouble by the enemy picking it up. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with you, but right now you're under arrest. You can go back to your barracks, but the only place you can go for the barracks is the mess hall. If you need anything else, you'll have to call headquarters and get it. So I told him, I don't know what we're going to do. I have to talk to the judge advocate. If he wants to have a general court martial and put you up to be in front of a firing squad, I'm not going to change his mind. And so they went back. They had learned their lesson. When the other guys came in, word spread rapidly. We were told not to talk. Don't do it. We had a sign out there that had been painted. What you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, don't let it stay here when you leave here. That was the motto. And it was serious. I'm going to leave you just a minute. I'm going to jump out to another situation with the security people. The man that was my security officer was a major. His name was Enola. He was an electrical engineer. He was a lawyer, both. He was a tough little rascal. He had been in Chicago before coming to Wendover. We had a partner. He and a partner were at Chicago. Because Enrico Fermi was experimenting in a laboratory beneath the stadium there, and there was a mole in there meeting an agent on the outside. And I said, what'd you do? He said, well, I got all the telephones bugged so that they couldn't talk to anybody, and that I couldn't hear, he and his partner. And he said they always met at the same street light and usually around midnight, about a block or 2 blocks away, I don't know, from the University Stadium. I said, what happened? He said, well, on this night that they had arranged to meet, my partner and I decided it was time to get them. And I said, all right, what? He said, well, the stupid bastards, they came and they got under the street lights and they opened their coats and they exchanged things, and my partner and I were sitting there with our rifles on and we killed the bastards. I said, wasn't that dangerous? He said, Paul, he said, we stripped them of everything. There was nothing on them. Who would pay any attention to a couple of naked stiffs laying in the gutter in Chicago at midnight at night? I said, you got a point. That's how serious that was. Now, real quickly, and I don't want to shortcut this thing, but I want to tell you the ramifications of how it worked. We got our airplanes because I got a telephone call within a week from the time that I got back from Georgia with my wife. And the voice on the other end was the guy that had been my roommate at Kelly Field. He said, Paul, he said, I know you're doing something important. I'm not asking you what it is because I know you won't tell me. But he said, you're going to get 15 B-29s from the Martin plant at Omaha. Would you like to have fuel-injected engines? I said, I sure would. Would you like to have Curtiss reversible pitch propellers? Yep, I'll use them. He said, how about fast-acting bomb bay doors? I said, yeah. He said, I thought so, because there's already 40 sets of them on the way to Wendover. On the way to Omaha. Okay, now, fuel-injected engines remove most of the carburation problems. It also did real good as far as the other things are concerned. But the reversible pitch propellers were really something, because the airplane, if it was loaded to any heavy weight, and you got to going on the runway, and you lost an engine, you couldn't stop the airplane. It would just go right off if it was an outboard engine. If it was the inboard engine, you still couldn't stop it. But you might be able to keep it on the runway and keep from getting killed. The fast-acting doors, the ones in the ones ahead of it, it took them about a minute and a half to open. It took them about 3 minutes to get back closed, cruising along. That only caused the engines to get hotter. With that, I ordered the airplanes to be stripped of all their armament except the tail guns. We kept the tail guns in case something like that happened, because with those, I knew 30,000 feet, somewhere in that neighborhood, the fighters couldn't catch me. I had a free ride there. The aircraft wasn't accurate above 20, so I didn't worry about it. We as I say, we had a free ride on that, and that became really a most interesting organization. We got trained. We did all of the things we were supposed to do. Now, as we completed the business of making this unit, we took certain TOs and Es, because I got 5 C-54s to go with them. We took the TOs and table of organization and equipment, and we lined out what we didn't want. We sent them in, because I had to get myself experienced ordnance people. People, tool and die makers, and people of that quality. I had to get my security, and I got a military police company, Army style, but they were wearing uniforms, Air Force uniform. But I got the number of men and the qualifications, the same thing. They were good guardsmen. In that organization, we got 6 Navy airmen, so they could speak Japanese when we got the Japanese. They were Japanese Navys from Hawaii. Well, okay. the cohesion of that thing really with the strangest people and so forth. Now, if you talk to, if somebody breaks any security, and the only guy that did it was the lieutenant colonel that I put in there to do my operations officer. He wouldn't keep his mouth shut for nothing. He didn't know anything, but I finally got tired of fooling with him, and I told Yuan, I said, let's give him a trip. He said, okay, tomorrow morning. I told the man, I said, we're going to take a staff car and send you into Salt Lake City. There's going to be a C-47 there to pick you up and take you to a special assignment. Okay. Well, the special assignment was up in Canada, northern Canada. These people had built, the Manhattan District had built a place up there called a rest camp. It was guarded 500 miles from any place. And they could do all the talking they wanted to do. It wouldn't make a damn bit of difference. Well, Carl went up there and spent the rest of the war. I lost my train of thought. Oh, I'm going to move you out to the islands real quick. When we got set up out there with the organization, it was done. I had from mid of September until the first week of December, when I got a thing, your organization is now going to be known as the 509th Composite Group. That's what I wanted to bring up. We had it almost whipped by that time, and it was working real good. Now, when we got out on the islands, we had a little bit different situation out there. We'd been working on our own, no people to deal with. I had gone out and talked to General May, told him we were coming out there, what we were going to do, and in secret, he said, good. He said, let me know if anything goes wrong. I said, I don't know why anything should go wrong. Now, I knew right then and there, we had to comply with the theater protocol, the theater methods of doing everything. We couldn't do what we wanted to do. Now, at Wendover and on the island, you had to have a white pass just to get into the housing area. If you had a green pass, a blue pass, you could go into the area where the airplanes were. To get in the ordnance squadron, you had to have an orange pass. Well, we were out there, and we were belonging to the 315th Bomb Wing, commanded by Brigadier General Davies. Nice guy, very nice guy. He always had his group commanders come to his mess at his headquarters, so he could talk about what's going on, what we're going to do, what everybody else is going to do, what we did yesterday, this, that. And I was out on the flight practicing with Tom and Dutch, and when I got out, they told me, General Davies wants you to come up about 10 minutes early today. He said, got to talk to you. And I said, okay, fine. So I went up there, and after I got my clothes changed in the shower, I went up, and I went in to see him, and he looked at me. He said, I went out to look at one of your airplanes today. I said, oh? He said, the guard challenged me. I said, yes, he was supposed to do that. He asked me if I had a green pass. I told him I don't need one. I got my AGO card here. And the kid says, General Davies, I recognize you, sir, but if you don't have a green pass, you can't get on this airplane. He said, about the time while he was talking, I took my first step. And the guy lowered his gun, cocked it. He said, General, one more step and you're dead. He said, would he have shot me? I said, General, I know he would have. He said, I thought so. It's the reason I came back. Well, let's get on with the mission. Tom and Dutch and I had flown together in Europe. Dusenberry, the flight engineer, had been with me during all of the test work on B-29s. I had a real elite group there. Of course, I had Captain Parsons and his assistant, a man named Morris Nelson, And we had a man by the name of Jacob Beezer, who was a frequency with radio. He was an expert on that. He was back there to scan all the frequencies that were being used to be sure if was any of those close to the bomb frequencies, ignition frequency. We were ready to go now on the 5th of August. Now we had gotten the preliminary thing. Truman was at Potsdam talking with Stalin and Churchill. They were going to be breaking up. So we started the preliminaries to get everything ready. And what I mean by that, we got the whole thing done so that all we had to do at the last minute was just to go out to the airplane, get on. We loaded the bomb, we did everything. And on the night of the 5th, we got word from Washington that Truman had said go. And with that, the only thing we had to do, as I say, is do the flight plans, have our evening meal, get out there at the airplane, take off, go. Dutch flight planned it out, because I always, no matter what we did, I would say, oh, we got to do something at a certain time. I'd say, Dutch, give me this time for arrival. Back it up. What do we have to take off? He said, okay. Well, on this particular night, he had it all figured out early a.m. in the morning. I said, what time do we get off the ground? He said, oh, if we can get off about 1:30, 1:45, it'd be fine. And I said, fine. We went out, got into the airplane. We took off. Now, the strike order says to bomb target time 9:15 a.m. Tinian time. So we took off, and I was going to have 2 airplanes accompany me, not in the formation, but they were going to carry instrumentation. So that when the bomb exploded, the transponder would tell the receiver what the magnitude happened to be of that explosion. My theory was, I said, look, I'm going to meet you at Iwo Jima. I'll be at 9,000 feet. 9,000 is a beautiful time out there, because that time of the year you could fly just in silk. I mean, just as nice, and you wouldn't even have any little puffy crowds around. I said, I'll meet you there. You will, I'll make one 360-degree circle of Iwo Jima. I'll expect you to be on my wing and stay somewhere half a mile behind me. I'm tail gunner, keep eyes on you, tell you what you're doing. I arranged with them. When we got to the bomb run, I made turn on the last final heading toward the target. I said, I'll start counting after I said, bomb, this is the initial point. That's all I said, initial point. And I would tell them then when it was 30 seconds away from bomb release time, 20 seconds, 10 seconds, 9, 8, 7, down the thing. So they could keep track of it, because they had to use a manual release to throw the stuff out of their bomb bay. We had a manual on the airplane, all of them, just in case the thing didn't work through the mechanism of the bomb sight. Then that didn't happen. Everything worked perfectly. We came in on a run. I was 31.7, plugging along there just as pretty as could be. We didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. We released our bomb right on time, made my turn away from it, because I didn't want to stay around. Well, I knew it was going to be far from it. Turns out I was 10.5 miles from it when it exploded, because I made this turn to get away from it, getting tangent to the ever-expanding shock wave of the explosion, which was what Robert Oppenheimer told me to do. I had dropped the nose in the turn to keep my airspeed up, and when I got it around to 160, I started to lift it up, and just then the whole sky lit up in front of me in the prettiest pinks and blues you ever saw. And with that, the shock wave hit us. A second wave hit us, but didn't mount to much. The first shock wave measured 2.5 G-forces. And later calculations showed we were 10.5 miles from it when it exploded. Okay, they translated that and said it's close to the equivalent of 17,000 tons of TNT. And we went on back with no problems at all. We landed. Before we landed, the bombardier had to fill out a bombing report log, same as the navigator. He said, "But Dutch, what time did the bomb explode?" And that says 9:15 plus 15 seconds. Fairby said, "Jesus Christ, that's lousy. I missed it by 15 seconds." I said, "Well, if you had told me, I'd have adjusted the course to make it a bit better." But anyway, we got back. We were welcomed and all those types of things. And with that, nothing happened. As you know, we sent the Nagasaki airplane out. They had weather problems, a couple of things there, but they did get their bomb off on Nagasaki. 2 or 3 days later, the Japanese had made offers of peace, and that ended our deal at the island. Okay, I've overtalked my time, but I want to try to give you another few minutes. I'm going to get Mr. Newhouse up here. He's worked with me for about 5 years on these types of things, and he's going to ask the questions, or take the questions. You've already got some, and I'm going to try to answer those questions as best I can. Now, Pete, don't ask anything about George Patton.
Oh, that'll be my second question.
Patton was at Fort Benning when I was there. He was a lieutenant colonel.
A couple of people asked me how old you were, and I said, I'm not going to ask him that question, but he'll tell you what year he was born.
Yeah, I'm 86.
Where were you when Pearl Harbor was attacked?
Well, I was on my way flying an 820 from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, down to, you get me all right, down to Savannah. And beautiful day. I'm riding along, the announcer comes on. I'm watching the radio compass. The announcer says, "Stand by. We've got an important announcement." And within a matter of 10 seconds, he comes back. He said, "We have just been informed that the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor." I said, "What the hell's Orson Welles up to now?"
What was the name of your B-17 you flew in Africa and Europe?
Oh, my B-17E, which was a good airplane, wonderful airplane, called the Red Gremlin. The Red Gremlin flew a record by Boeing's record. It flew 284 sorties. It flew over there. It flew back here in time to get melted.
Could you tell us a story about George Patton?
No, not this time.
How old were you when you were given the assignment to organize the 509th?
29.
There's a couple of men here in the audience who were members of Paul's 509th. Could you stand up?
There they are.
What was your favorite airplane to fly?
Well, I know what the question really comes around to, but it depends on what you're going to do. The B-17 and the B-29 will both take a terrible beating, but you got a more comfort getting your beating flying a B-29 because it was pressurized.
Were all the B-29s built in Omaha, Nebraska?
No. Martin Airplane built them in Omaha. Lockheed built them in Marietta, Georgia. Boeing built them at Seattle and Renton.
Did you ever meet crew members from the USS Indianapolis?
Yes, I did. He and I were out to one of their reunions this past, a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
Where they had a reunion in Indianapolis. That's the closest knit outfit I've ever seen. At that time, I don't know how many were living, but
there were 70 there.
70, they were there. But anyway, That's how many came to the reunion. But on the reunion roster, there was over 300 people. They all brought every relative they had, children and everything. That was great.
Why did Navy Captain Parsons arm the ball after takeoff?
Well, the night before we were to go, an airplane had started down the runway, loaded heavily, and it lost an outboard engine. It went into the fuel dump and then into the bomb dump, killing everybody. Now, Parsons said, well, I don't know. We don't have to do that. And he got through. There's some people representing the Manhattan District on the island with us, civilians. He said, I can arm that thing with Jepson while the airplane's in flight after we take off. Fine. But the other answer was, had the airplane crashed and done the same thing, there would not have been a nuclear explosion. It had just been the loss of a lot of good material.
Was there a third atomic bomb?
There was a third atomic bomb, and after a couple of days when the Japanese didn't do anything, LeMay called me and said, you got another one of those damn things? I said, yes, sir. Where? Wendover, Utah. I said, get it out here, and you and your crew are going to fly it. We got stopped here in California.
Were any of your crew exposed to radiation?
Well, not in the sense the airplane was checked when we got back. I'd asked Dr. Oppenheimer, I said, we'll get some radiation. He said, yeah, you will. I said, how do we get rid of it? He said, fly through 2 or 3 clouds and it'll wash off. And that's what happened.
Can you compare the size between Hiroshima and San Diego? Like back then?
Well, no, I didn't get clear enough look at it as we were on the way in. I'm sitting there, but on the way back out, I got to look at it underneath all that cloud and dust, but whatever the size of population was, we reduced it.
How many of your crew members are still alive?
Okay, the crew members and the people who are on the airplane. Well, let's put the crew members. There are only crew members that are left now. 10 would be normal, but there's only 3 of us left. Myself, the navigator, and the radio operator. Radio operator Nelson was the youngest man, and so forth and so on. He's in bad shape today with emphysema.
I have more of a comment here from a man who was a POW in Nagato, Japan. He said he's glad you missed him. Had B-29s flown over Hiroshima before your mission?
I can't answer that, but I know one thing. 30 days before, they hadn't flown over any one of the targets that we were expected to hit.
We had a couple other comments from people thanking you for your service, and they were happy they didn't have to invade Japan. Regarding the current crisis, what are your thoughts with respect to the use of nuclear weapons in Afghanistan?
Okay, in Afghan and all that. No, when this thing came up, look, we'd had 55 or 6 years. Nobody shot a nuclear weapon at anybody else or didn't use it. And everybody was keen to detect one. I didn't think, number one, I didn't think it would be prudent under that circumstance to do it, but more than anything else, why waste it? You'd be wasting, you could just blow it up over a bunch of places. But again, that weapon was non-discriminating. It killed everybody. And what we're dealing with now is a different type of mentality with a different type of networks and so forth. And I had hoped that when they did that they would wait, stop, think about it, and then pick it off a little bit at a time and put those guys on the alert and keep them on the alert, and that'll make their system fall apart.
Before I ask Paul the last question, I want to remind you to please give General Tibbets a little bit of time to go use the restroom before he goes to sit down. and he'll stay here as long as someone wants to say hello to him. And, you know, we appreciate you all coming, and especially the wonderful staff and volunteers at this incredible museum. They've just been wonderful to us, and we really appreciate it. You're lucky to have such an incredible place here. Stay up here. And
Thank you very much.
The last question is, do you have any regrets for the mission?
I have absolutely none. I've never lost a night's sleep.
Thank you, General.